Hey, now up here I'll be revealing to you the current top meta raid builds and strats that the top alliances and I use to reach those raid numbers you saw in King God Castle. This information is usually kept under wraps within the English and Western audience, but it's quite open in other communities. However, I intend to start breaking that mold right now, so keep in mind that the raid builds are continually being tweaked as relics and heroes get added and adjusted, so you'll have to switch on the fly yourself. But in this video I'll be showing the current top meta build for the raid boss Greed. Now, first things first, a little preface. This is intended for advanced and top-end players only. Having said that, awakened heroes are definitely required if you're a beginner. Please feel free to ask the community or stick around for future videos on my channel. I'll be showing you the standard build and positions, and it will be exactly that, standard. It will be up to you to tweak your position and build to suit your needs. That's why practice mode exists in the first place. And lastly, knowing the build is only about 20% of the work, so the rest comes from knowledge in like raid forming, positioning, and pathing, all of which I won't be going over in this video. Let's quickly talk about what Greed Boss actually does. I'll be talking about the boss as if all the divine properties are activated. The main thing to take away from the skill is that he'll put up a shield that will reduce a lot of damage. However, you can actually take away this shield by stunning him twice if you're diamond rank and above. And the meta build currently right now uses Priya to take away that shield, right? So for the rest of the things on this list, as I said, this one changes the stun requirement to 2 times. This one just increases the damage reduction. This one just means that the shield will come up more often. So this is the other thing you need to consider when fighting Greed Boss is adjacency. So if you see right here, you get minus 60% damage if you are non-adjacent. And then you actually get a 15% bonus damage if you are adjacent. I'm actually going to bring up a picture here. So all the raid bosses actually occupy a 3x3 square. And adjacency means the spaces that are right up against the boss, and it is more accurate to say orthogonally adjacent. Also, if your carries are on these corner spots right here, it won't count as orthogonally adjacent, right? So you'll get that massive damage reduction. So this is why we use Mel for Greed Boss specifically, because she has 1 range and she hits like a truck, right? Having said that, +1 range bow effects really screws up Greed builds. Next, let's talk about the build, and I'll give you the TLDR reasons for each. I'll be breaking down the builds like this. So carry, supports, booster, conditional, and optional units. For carry, we'll be using Mel, as I mentioned. This is because she is range 1, so she has no problem being adjacent to Greed Boss. For awakening, I actually recommend awakening 2, unleash. This is what I generally prefer and recommend. Awakening 1 has more startup frames, and additional shockwave damage doesn't really amount to too much. Awakening 2 also gets rid of the shockwave activation, but it provides more uptime, which translates to more damage within a raid setting. However, I know some people who simply just prefer Awakening 1, so I kind of recommend just testing both out yourself and see what you prefer. There are some reasons to pick Awakening 1, for example, for positioning reasons, but I won't be going over that. So yeah, for tier that we'll be leaving Mel at, it's standard to leave the carry at tier 5. If you get higher, great, but usually tier 5 is the baseline. So for the first support we'll be using is Bard with Awakening 1, and we'll be leaving this at tier 3. With Bard Awakening, she can be kept at only tier 3 while covering most, if not all, of the Lunaires, right? So this is really important. And the other support that we'll be using is Lunaire with Awakening 2. You'll be filling up the rest of your gloves with Lunaire and then adding in as many high tier loons as possible. Even with the Lunaire nerfs, it's still best to stack Lunaires. It hasn't changed. So yeah. For damage boost, there are actually 4 units in the game that boost your overall damage. If you don't know who they are Rahak, Mara, Rosette, and Mercil. Rahak, you don't need Awakening actually, and it will provide 10% damage boost. Mara and Rosette both provide 15%, but they have to have Awakenings. Mercil is actually really good is because she is range, provides 15%, and she doesn't need to be awakened. And for the damage boost, usually you just leave it at tier 1. So just a tier 1 unit and it boosts your overall damage by 10 to 15%. It's pretty good, right? However, in this video, I'm going to be showing it to you with Rawhawk since that's standard, because usually a Mercil is used in your other builds, so you can't really use her in Mel builds, but it's entirely up to you and very interchangeable. So for the next category, conditional, these are units that we'll be using in response to what the boss does. So in this case, Greed Boss puts up a shield that can be taken away if we stun it twice, right? So for that, the meta build uses Priya right now, 2 of them in fact, Awakening 1, and you leave both of them at tier 2. Now you can have a tier 2 Priya and a tier 1 Priya, is just like the sync is not perfect, but it'll still work. And if you want perfect sync between Bard, Priya, and the Greed skill, then the recipe is Bard tier 3 with no additional attack speed from relics or items, and 2 Priyas at tier 2 with 20% attack speed relic. And if you have that, then every time Greed does his skill, the Priya will immediately take it away. So it's almost non-existent. If you don't have perfect synced, which I usually don't, it will kind of be off sync. It will still work, but it won't be perfect. I actually don't recommend striving for perfect synced. If you have it, great. If you don't, it's okay. I actually prefer the 20% attack speed relic on Mel, but that's just me. But yeah, just something to know that exists. All right, so for the next category, optional, it's specifically used just for Kayn. So for Kayn with Awakening 1, you can use him to farm items. There are strategies and ways to do this, but usually if I have a team and I have a 6th spot open, I usually just throw in Kayn if I haven't used them already, and you can try to farm more items, right? And as a special little something, since you guys are watching this video, I'll share a little special tech that you guys can try out. So supposedly you're able to substitute Priya with the new hero Heirang for the stuns, and you only need 1 Heirang. And he doesn't have to be awake. So since his skill throws 2 projectiles, and each projectile will stun each, so it's enough to break Greed Boss's shield. So try it out. Let me know how it performs, because I actually haven't been able to confirm it myself. So yeah, let me know. So for altars, we'll be running the standard 15 hero. For the other 10 points, I personally always use 10 greed. However, I know some people who prefer 10 blacksmith instead, so I just suggest you try them both out, see what you like. For relics, we'll be running the standard glove relic. If you don't know what glove relic does, of course, I'll leave a link down in the description below. Check out my video. For the other one, the current meta is to use Holy Cross from Arena. The last meta was Mask Relic, but it isn't as good anymore due to the Lunaire nerfs. For relic stats, of course, more attack speed, the better, and you give them to Mel, of course. For items, staffs on highest Lunaire and bows on Mel, of course, going after that sweet +1 attack count affix for huge damage. If you have swords, I actually put them on either, but I put them on Mel first if I have space. Armor usually goes on Bard as standard. If you have extra bows, then give them to Bard. And the +1 range bow affix will screw up Greed builds, as I mentioned, so it will make Mel +2 range, which will put her out of adjacency range. This is why we don't use Zao, for example. So yeah, Mel is considered a melee unit, so if you combine bows on her, you won't be getting the +1 range. So that's something to know. So this build with max level heroes will get you around 7 to 9 million damage, standard, easily. With a +1 attack count, you can get around 16 to 20 million plus damage, depending on how high you rolled on your Lunaire tiers. Currently, I'm just in a temporary alliance and I haven't touched raid, so I can't really show you the full potential of the build. So first, we'll be going to a practice battle to show you the build that I just presented to you. And then after, I'm going to show you a recording of this build that I luckily have a few seasons ago with a +1 attack count, so you can actually see an example of what you can actually achieve, right? So first, let's do a practice battle, and I'll show you that. Alright, so this is usually the standard positioning for the build. You leave Rawhawk in the corner here, Mel on Holy, and then this weird setup is because to force Bard in the middle. But Mel has to stop channeling and then go first, or unless if it doesn't happen, then she'll get locked out. So yeah, boom, the Lunaires will just fill in the spots, and that's pretty much generally how the start works. All right, and lastly, I will show you that recording that I have with +1 attack count. I actually don't have a damage booster in that video. And there it is, the current Greed Boss meta build that all the top alliances use. Be sure to check out my other raid meta builds that I reveal. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.